Of course, the Irish were not always the best friends of the Jews, were probably never good friends of the Jews, never, just never took quite liking to them. And that shows in both what the population is doing. We've seen the amounts of Irish people spitting on Jews that happen to show up in Ireland, because how do they dare? We've, of course, seen the amount of, from the Irish government, we've seen the amount of hatred going towards Israel, really bad foreign policy, the generally the lack of complete moral clarity when it comes to anything, their support of terrorism, the fact that they are not even part of NATO. So technically, I'm not sure how they are independent nation. I think we can do something about it. Although I'm not advocating for anything. And there has been an article by the Irish Times, not an article. Technically, it's an editorial. So they don't have to actually tell you any facts. They can just do whatever. And yeah, so we'll read through the article. It's not a long article, but at least when I read it, I think it probably took me like 1 hour to sort of read a passage, then walk around my house for 10 minutes, having an argument in my own head, then coming back and reading a bit more, then doing that for about an hour. So we'll go through the article. You can find it in the description. Thank you, Jonathan, for your super chat. He says, Team Marco and Richard. Thank you so much. And yeah, so joining me today are Marco and Richard. Welcome to the reality show. And before I go to your article, Marco, any thoughts about it?
Well, yeah, it's a very short article. It's about, I think you counted the words, it's around 500 words, but they're all neatly arranged to give you the impression that Israel, as usual, is the bad guy, and to give you the impression that there is a massive humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and to give you the impression that it's all Israeli made. So to be honest, just reading the title is enough for you to have an idea of what the intention of the editorial is, which is to, again, create some propaganda lines for Hamas, really. But yeah, as you said, we're going to go through it, yay, and yeah, take it apart.
And I can just add that it's nice of you to crap on the Irish at the beginning there, but quite honestly, this could have been any nation. This editorial came out of, including Israel, sadly, and that is part of the problem that Israel is facing and the West is facing, quite honestly, at the moment. And the idea, of course, that there is a distinction in journalistic terms between editorial and article is itself dissolved into one and the same thing nearly everywhere. So. Sadly, that's representative of journalism today, but I don't want to be a party pooper here.
So yeah, let's go into the article. It's an editorial, as I said. It's called "The Irish Times View on Israel's Plan in Gaza: Anatomy of a War Crime." Already really great title. Starting with the article. Despite US lobbying, the UN and virtually all other organizations have refused to participate. Despite denials from the Israeli government that hunger is now widespread in Gaza, even US President Donald Trump has acknowledged Gazans are starving. Food warehouses have emptied, child malnutrition is rising, the few functioning hospitals are running out of medicine, and warnings of starvation and disease are growing louder. Some government supporters openly defend blocking aid. One Knesset member said he was interested, in quotes, in starving an entire nation. And now quotes again, yes, I'll starve Gazans. Yes, this is our obligation. Now, they didn't mention who the politician was. I had to look that up. It was Bezalel Smotrich. He or at least I think it was Bezalel Smotrich. I mean, maybe it could have been somebody else, but I've seen him doing these comments, which we've seen in the past. So yeah, already sort of just going into this, denials by the Israeli government that there is a starvation in Gaza, despite that everybody says it. Everybody said since like December 23 there was a starvation in Gaza. Like, this is not something that's news. This is something that has been said by international organizations this whole time. Yet not a single death has happened when it comes to sort of dying from starvation. And this article doesn't even go into it. They don't even try to say or try to claim, oh, this many people have actually died from starvation. No, it's people are reporting it, and so take them at their word. I didn't know. I'm not reading that many editorials, but it really does seem that editorial is simply sort of a code word for I can just do whatever I want, or I can just say whatever I want, and somehow it's no bigger or rigor rather applies to it. It is like truly baffling. I mean, they mentioned like even U.S. President Donald Trump has said it, which again, I wish they like source anything, because I think he did say something along the lines of there is like a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. When asked by one reporters, I'm not sure if he ever said that there is a starvation. And of course, all of this is dropping context of what is actually going on, why this happened, what should happen. Is just sort of there's a humanitarian crisis. By the way, the subtitle of this is War Crimes. What is it? Anatomy of a War Crime. So you are supposed to take away from this that this is war crime being committed. Funnily enough, they do say it's Israel's plan in Gaza is to do war crimes. Not to mention, we don't have to talk about Hamas war crimes. Marco, any there is also the line about sort of some government supporters openly defend blocking aid, which I can comment on later. But Marco, anything on this first paragraph?
Yes, we don't talk about Hamas war crime because, of course, that kind of violence is bread and butter for them. So you can't distinguish their violence during times of peace and during war. So let's ignore those ones. Yeah, I mean, quoting the fact that Trump talked about people are starving in Gaza. I think he literally said, we have to get the humanitarian stuff going because people are starving in Gaza. But of course, Donald Trump has never exaggerated anything in his life. So we can take it at face value, can we? And then, this famine, this starvation has been reported a number of times for a number of months, but nobody's ever observed it. But it gets reported a lot. Again, South Park, we're just reporting it. Yeah, I mean, this title in itself, it's a genocide in the word anatomy because the article, as we mentioned, is about 400 words, so it's not really detailing anything apart from putting together a few phrases to make it sound like Israel is about to destroy Gaza and all the people in it. But the widespread famine was not there. There isn't small famine anyway. Children are malnourished. Well, yeah, well, I mean, Hamas has never been very good at providing any kind of support of well-being for their own population. They were too busy digging tunnels and building, a war machine against Israel. Again, the warnings, we heard the warnings, but anyone can warn anything, but it doesn't mean that it's true. So it's just trope after trope. And the mention of the guy, no, actually mentions Smotrich by name, because then it's referred it they refer to him later on in the article. It's a bit weird. It's just making it look like there is this, this hidden Kabbalah behind somewhere hiding in Israel, plotting the destruction of the Gazans, all this kind of crap. I mean, oh God in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, anatomy of a war crime, it does suggest some sort of forensic analysis, doesn't it? You've taken it apart piece by piece. You worked how every single element fits together, and it's indisputably scientific. No, it's a bunch of assertions leading up to a more vacuous assertion, which is just unfounded at face value. And even when you analyze it, it's even more so unfounded. I mean, it's talking about reporting and it's talking about claims of what might be in the future, mixed up with reporting about now. And just like in previous things where we've seen, like the Lancet article, for example, or the letter to the Lancet, which is itself called an article, which claimed that there was famine in Gaza. that in its that in itself was based on an assertion about what might be in the future if you extrapolated a bunch of data into a future mapping scenario. But it was always, when it was repeated by a gazillion people in all sorts of publications all over the place, as if that was a statement for what is happening now. And of course, that's exactly the fudge that occurs every time. What starts out as being what might happen in the future becomes repeated as what is happening now, and exaggerated at every single Chinese whisper's repetition of it. So, you get further and further away from reality, further and further away from the truth, quite honestly. The fact that the UN and all these other agencies aren't interested or are distancing themselves from the plan that Israel's got to make sure that where it does provide aid, in this new plan it's got, part of this Gideon's chariots, a plan it's got for moving people to the south and feeding them on a one-by-one basis, as opposed to giving it to Hamas via American private contractors. It's no wonder the UN don't want to be involved in that. They don't want that. They don't want that at all. They don't want the food to go into the hands of each individual mouth who could, in some cases, be said to be innocent, certainly when it comes to like the young children or whatever. No, they want it to go to Hamas. They want it to be their prerogative to distribute, to oversee, to justify their own existence with their aid agencies or UN-run bodies, whichever. They want to make sure that they are the kings of that domain, and therefore they don't want to be either ignored, usurped, and they don't want actually it to succeed either. And that's the bigger point, I think. So then you've got Trump, haven't you? You've got Trump. He wants to be the world savior. He wants to be the greatest world savior the world has ever seen. And that's the context in which he, as a throwaway remark, mentions starving Gazans, but only in the sense that he's going to solve everything in the Middle East with a stroke of the pen. And of course, that's just. But of course, that's taken out of context, and there's no greater politician for making offhand remarks that can be taken sometimes completely out of context, or sometimes treated as absolute statement of policy, and then shoved in a different article and declared that means he is of this opinion. Now, that's not to say he isn't often contradictory and irrational. Of course, he is, but of course, this is what comes from being that way, and from just shooting from the hip all the time, is you end up saying unthought out remarks which then get ripped out and thrown against you and thrown against your side. So none of that's good news. And then, of course, this last comment you made about quoting a member of the Knesset without naming them. It's as if the order's been shuffled in the article. You named him later on, but you thought, no, I can't name him and have only one quote from one guy all the way through it. That doesn't look like it's an anatomy of a war crime, does it? That looks like it's one bloke's opinion. So instead, I better reverse it, put some quotes in first, and then I'll name this guy later on, and it looked like somebody else. Does it? Not very convincing.
Yeah, and it reminds me of, there is one more sort of thread that I want to cover at some point. Maybe we'll do it this week. It's sort of like a historical overview of Israeli genocide against the Palestinians, or Israeli attempt to basically displace all the Palestinians from the sort of the so-called region of Palestine, or the sort of like near Middle East. And in those, they had like one quote from Theodor Herzl, the sort of the founder of Zionism, and there was like, they only had like one quote from him. And when you really think about this amount of like, there is this idea in sort of like live stream sort of broadcasting and things. It's called clip chimping, basically, that you like find a clip of somebody out of context and you use it. And the idea that somebody would like quote me 100 years from now, and they would use like one quote to summarize my entire sort of like view of everything is really funny to me, or really interesting when it comes to proper analysis and anatomy of a war crime. And not to mention, even talking about you're supposed to come out of this basically with assuming this is bad. Yes, I'll starve Gaza. Yes, this is our obligation. And my question is, well, is that bad? We are sort of like supposed to assume something. We're supposed to infer something from this. But the fact is, this is war. Israel is engaging in war, is trying to fight it, and you do whatever is necessary to do so. But that is not the thing that you're supposed to take away from it. Similarly to sort of like quoting organizations, and it is kind of interesting to like quote. There's like something I've heard about sort of when some of the pyramids in Egypt were sort of discovered, how depending on whose profession you invite to like try to guess what the, like this sort of thing does, they would like infer something from their profession, that oh, this has to be like a ventilation, if you ask somebody who like deals in ventilation. And in a similar way, if you ask somebody who deals with sort of like starvation in region, of course they say like that is like the biggest thing, because their job is not to have a worldview of how to fight a war, how to properly engage in war, what to do, what is like a moral necessity, what should be the role of government. No, their thing to say is, you know, is there something bad going on in this region? And they'll say, yeah. And of course there is. I mean, it's a war. You expect some people to not have properly access to the full pyramid of you know, not get all their carbs and proteins and everything they need. That is what you expect, but you need to have a full context about what's actually going on and what needs to happen. And this article, despite saying they will do it, is not doing anything from it. Like, you cannot just quote one organization and take whatever you want from it. Like, they provide a certain amount of context, but you still have to think about what to do with that information. Like, you know, we can, if there was a starvation in Gaza, which again there isn't, I could still use that information and actually make a decent comment, rather than you know, just saying it and, you know, that's it. That's enough thinking for today. Anything you guys want to say, or should we move on to the next?
No, I just wanted to add that the whole point of this article is just to provide some ammo to somebody who's already reached a conclusion. So if you are a pro-Hamas guy, if you love the Palestinians, hate the Jews, hate Israel, you're going to read this article. I mean, it's just an article for you. And the whole point is not to be critical about it, not to provide counterpoints, but it's just to strengthen your views, effectively give you a concrete in order to make your conviction even stronger, to fortify your conviction. And the underlying assumption, for example, is that wars in the West nowadays in the West are not won. They just fought. You drag them along as long as you can by feeding your enemies, by being nice to them, and then you can bomb them a bit, but not too much. Otherwise, you know, there's no victory, no end victory. We've seen since the end of the Second World War, we never fought in the West a war or a battle in order to win. Just look at the recent tragedy of the war in Iraq after 9/11. What did we do? Well, we just appeased the Muslim world by inventing the new Islamophobia idea. So, I mean, all this kind of stuff is just designed to provide a point of view which you already reached anyway. Just give you, make you feel like you're on the right line. Don't despair if Israel is doing well. Don't despair if Palestinian Hamas has been seen on the wrong end. It's just a blip in history. If you hate the Jews, if you hate Israel, you're on the right line. Just stick with it.
And of course, just to mention that this particular article is also accompanied at the start by a giant poster-sized photograph that's about the same size as the amount of words in the rest of the article, which of course is shows, you know, lots of women try with their empty pots trying to get fed at a kitchen in Nuseirat, the camp in Nuseirat. Now behind them, you can see quite a bit of Nuseirat. I'm not sure whether I'm saying that with the right accent, but you can certainly see quite a number of pretty decent buildings in the background there that aren't tents, haven't been knocked up overnight, and are certainly still standing. But of course, that's not what you're supposed to concentrate on. You're supposed to concentrate on the empty pots, even if there's another giant pot of food just out of shot of the camera that's about to be emptied in the next shot. And it's a very performative style photo from the way it's done. And of course, we're being told in this article yet again that hospitals are running out, about to run out of medicine. Now, that is a line that is peddled every single week and has been for what, 100 weeks or thereabouts. It's absolutely ludicrous the number of times that this fear mongering state of what's about to happen in terms of utter tragedy is peddled out once again in the same way that, I don't know. Other things are often peddled out on a wider scale, like climate change, for example. It's the same kind of MO. You just repeat the fear mongering once again and assume that people don't remember that it didn't come true last week.
Right. Let's read a bit more. International organizations from the UN to the EU, what other are in the middle between those two other, have described what they call the in quotes weaponization of hunger as a war crime. To date, some 18,000 children are reported to have died in the 19-month onslaught that, according to local health officials, has taken over 52. Oh, I think it's supposed to say 52,000, but it says 520,000, but it has like the comma is after 52, so I think they it's just misspoke. Or, whatever. It's the 5,050,000. It's the same thing. Yeah, I think there's enough to comment on because, again, it starts with UN to the EU have described what they call the weaponization of hunger as a war crime. To date, some 18,000 children are reported to have died. These two things have no connection, yet they are next to each other. It's hunger has been used as weaponization of the war crime. 18,000 children have died right next to each other. If you sort of miss it, you might think 18,000 children have died from starvation, which is, of course, not the case. Not to mention, there is no context for the numbers themselves. It's according to local health officials. Which again sort of drops a lot of context about the fact that local health officials means Hamas members. And even, I mean, if they were a bit sort of much more smarter, they would say the UN Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs is saying that 52,000 lives have been taken, which again would be inaccurate to say, would serve propaganda a bit more, but the UN Coordination for Humanitarian Affairs confirming the numbers pretty much just means, hey, did these people die? Okay, and that's it. That's all the confirmation there is from the UN. So it's just pretty much confirming the same numbers. Marco?
Yeah, I mean, the EU and the UN, I mean, the EU is made up of 20.
Whoa, from the UN to the...
Yeah, no, but the EU is made up of 27 countries, which they all belong to the UN. So once you say the UN, it's enough. And the UN itself, what is it? Really, it's just it's a wannabe super state government that's trying to impose and interfere in everybody's life more and more. It's effectively statism on steroid, which with no accountability whatsoever, which is making its way into our lives. And by doing that, why they're doing that? Well, first of all, because it's a thirst for power, pure political power. And second, is also in this mixed economy that we live in, is a big it's a big market for altruism. It's a big market for humanitarian business, which we're talking billions here, billions and billions every year, which provide jobs for pointless people like Francesca Albanese and all the bureaucrats, the thousands of bureaucrats that infest the building in New York, and plus all the buildings are along the way. I think Ayn Rand used the word profiteers of altruism. Well, it's them, the EU, the UN, all these institutions who profess to love humankind. Actually, all they want to do is dominate humankind. They want to have the political power to make you do what they want you to do. And they're quite explicit. Just look at lockdown. Where did it come from? the UN was quite happy to push that line, wasn't it? So there you go. I mean, do we really trust the UN in doing anything good? Aren't the UN behind the very UNRWA and the brainwashing of children in the area, teaching them how to hate Jews, how to kill Jews?
And if there's a weaponization of hunger, surely that's done by Hamas, isn't it? Isn't that exactly what Hamas does with its own population all the time by retaining the food which is for them in their own coffers, using it to raise finances, using it to ensure that it can completely control the Palestinian people. And that's insofar as there's a distinction in the first place between them. But there's no Hamas, is there? Not really. Not in this article. There's no Hamas. Not in the photo. Not in the article. They're not the enemy. Israel's the enemy. That's the only point here. That's the point from the beginning. The point from the headline. It's the point of the whole article. So all we need to do, if that's the case, this kind of editorial writer that this person is writing this article, is quote some numbers, because numbers are the same as truth. Doesn't matter whether they're true or not; they just sound true.
We have a super chat from PC. Thank you so much. He says all Jews need to not visit Ireland. Oh, I thought it said Israel. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why you would. There is, yeah, I especially with the like generally even when it comes to Europe itself. I mean, just recently I've seen another sort of news about the Israeli tourists in Hungary who were beaten up by by some German teenagers in Hungary. So again, and we remember the sort of the Amsterdam where people just decided to go after Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. We've seen some of the similar things at the UK streets. So there is, if you are Jewish, sort of visiting the fact that visiting like sort of like Western Europe or visiting sort of Western countries themselves is sort of a sort of like a scary thing, is a sort of something you have to be wary of. So yeah, I definitely agree. Somebody's asking if there is any Ayn Rand centers in Ireland, where we like to think that we are an Ayn Rand center for every country that is looking for alternative. There is none, at least as far as I'm aware. But I think if you're following Ayn Rand Center UK, you are getting what you need. Um, Anything to say, or should we continue?
Go ahead.
Oh, wait, I actually did have a question about or sort of like something I've been wondering about, generally the nature of evil, the nature of people who do, like people at the UN, people who do commit sort of uh, like do commit to pro-Palestinian cause and sort of their psychology. I'm wondering because you have like two potential sort of people who work for these organizations, right? Maybe not at the top. Maybe the top has just one type of person, but sort of let's say in the middle or at the bottom, you might have like people who are sort of good meaning, people who want to help the people around the world when it comes to humanitarian situations or anything like it. And you have people who might just straight up be sort of like pro-terrorist, right? And something I was wondering about both of them is what do they do when they see what Hamas is doing? That the fact that, let's say the aid they are trying to provide to the Palestinians is being stolen by Hamas. Like, what do you do then? At some point do you question what you're doing, or do you just go, well, that is just a sort of like a necessary sacrifice you have to take, when because you want to help those people, you just have to accept that you are helping terrorists, you are helping some terrorists to continue forward. Because I cannot, like, what other sort of thing you can say to yourself to, after all of that, think it's okay. Not sure if you guys have any comment on that.
Well, ultimately, this is all irrational behavior in the sense that these people do not think. They just accept what they've been taught, what they've been told as the truth, without ever questioning why am I doing this? Is this has this guy any value? And those kind of stuff. For example, you can be intrinsicist in the sense that giving money to somebody is good, and you never question whether the somebody is a terrorist or actually somebody who's actually starving, and you never question whether it's in your own self-interest to help that person in the first place. The action itself for helping is good, so you do it, and you don't question, you don't check whether the consequences of your actions are good or bad. Ends there. And then you have the pure evil subjectivist that wants to impose their view of the world on everybody else. So ultimately, you can either be totally evil and do evil deeds, but even the well-meaning person, usually the religious person, the nun or the priest that want to do good, they never question why they're doing it, and that ultimately, it comes from the fact that you take as a given that giving a piece of bread to somebody starving is a good thing. Well, depends on the context. You have to engage your brain, work out why is the person starving, what's gonna do after giving them the food. But they don't do that. They just stop.
And I think Ayn Rand used the phrase blank out a lot to indicate just that. The fact that people can blank out the contradiction which exists in their own argument, evade the part of it which is exact opposite of what they claim they're trying to do, what they claim their intent is, because it would destroy not only their own ethics, their own attitude towards themselves, but of course their self-esteem and everything. It would literally show up to their face exactly the problem that they are, exacerbating, and that's what's happening here, isn't it? They are actually aiding terrorists. They are encouraging hostage takers. They're ensuring that violence is sanctioned and that therefore more violence is used as a means towards an end because they claim that the end justifies the means. Might makes right is the ultimate analysis of what they're saying here. And then by the way they're sanctioning it, they're saying might makes right. But of course, they don't want to concentrate on that. They want to use the word peace, which is the opposite of might, even though that is the crux of their blank out.
Let's read a bit more. Ahead of Trump's visit to the region next week, instead of reopening border crossings to international aid, Israel has proposed a new supply mechanism for limited amounts of humanitarian assistance under conditions it will strictly control. Under the plan, food supplies vetted by Israel would be allowed to travel through designated corridors to Israeli constructed distribution hubs in southern Gaza. The corridors and the hubs are to be guarded by private US security contractors. So again, no context of the fact that Hamas has been stealing the aid and then selling it back to the Palestinians. No context for the fact that Hamas has not provided the infrastructure for distribution of aid, which they are supposed to under international law if you want to go by that standard. It's just, no, Israel bad. They want to do some crazy things, limited amounts of humanitarian assistance, which I don't know what the hell that means. Strictly control, having standards and wanting to make sure that the aid doesn't go to terrorists. That means strictly control. Then the fact that it's going to be vetted by Israel. Okay, the fact that you don't you want to make sure that the weapons don't go into Hamas's hands. That's you're just wetting it. And yeah, the travel through designated corridors, again, that is something that sort of should be applauded if anything, but nobody cares about international. Nobody actually cares about what the hell any sort of even international standards are supposed to be. It's just Israel bad, and whatever we can do to say Israel bad, that's what we'll say, as always. Any comments, Marco?
Well, the fact that the border crossing are closed, so what? They were used by Hamas to move weapons and all sort of aid and taking over the aid that was going through. So why should it be open in the first place? Does it matter if it's open or shut, as long as the real innocents among the Gazans, very few of them, get some aid after Israel has vetted, made sure that among the consignment, you don't have weapons or stuff that ends up going up, to Hamas. And yes, it's limited in the sense that it will go to the civilian population rather than going to help Hamas. So, under the point of view, it's limited. That's not the kind of delivery that the UN would want to do because they're quite happy to, you know, it wouldn't be the first time that weapons are smuggled through some humanitarian aid, some food and stuff that's supposed to help the civilians. So, I mean, Israel is putting in place a system to vet the people, move them away from the north to the south, and then feed them in the south with the supplies that they can feel confident are not going to Hamas and are not going to be hiding weapons for Hamas itself. So again, Israel is feeding its own enemies in the sense. So that's bad. But these people do not care whether the food goes in or not. As you mentioned earlier on, they don't really care. The UN or the agency, they don't care about the actual aid to the people. They just want to control the multi-billion business.
Yeah, and there's so much that you can read into not only the author, but the general culture, so ideology in the course of this article. I mean, the way they talk about the private US contractors. Now, that private US contractor is basically, in any context, is considered evil. It's trying to make money out of whatever it's doing, which is already evil in the context of this author and the culture's attitude towards it. Whereas an NGO or a supranational body like the UN, they are the definition of good because they are not trying to make evil money out of it. They are simply taking money, which is not evil, from people who actually make it all over the world by force in order to spend it where they choose. And of course, this is utter nonsense, and also this limited amount business, because the NGOs and the UN, the supranational bodies, are always limitless, because there's a limitless pool of people that they can pull on, that they can drain for finances in order to continue forevermore doing the kind of work they do. It's eternal, it's perpetual, and perpetual war is the result of it. And that's why they don't want the end to a war, because their existence is justified by perpetual war.
Yeah, it that sort of it reminds me. Maybe you can remind me of a organization in Atlas Shrugged, something about unaffiliated citizens without like no interest, or I cannot remember what was the name of it. Do you remember?
Not off the top of my head, but yes, yeah, absolutely. They're disinterested people whose virtue is the fact that they are disinterested, even though their interest is quite apparent, really.
Yeah, it was something. Yeah, something like that. Basically, like a organization with no interest, because as soon as you have some motive, as soon as you have some reason for doing something, that makes you basically incapable of actually doing something objectively, at least according to them. So, because Israel has interest in not delivering aid to its enemies, because those, let's say, private contractors would have an interest in forbidding Hamas from coming in, that makes them pretty much unfit for the role. But organizations that do not care, that will deliver aid to whoever, that's something that's okay. And we had somebody in the chat talking about that basically he doesn't want the idea to sort of do the distribution of the aid. And yeah, when I talk about sort of the international standard or whatever, I'm sort of just trying to call out how these people should applaud this, but I understand why they don't, and I understand why this is still sort of a bad thing to do. Now, once Israel fully occupies Gaza, it will be the administrator of the region, and it would have to sort of maybe momentarily provide some humanitarian aid until sort of things can be settled, and then it can sort of open up. But yeah, the fact that this is happening while the war is still going on is something I'm very much unsure about. It's something I'm very much, I think, goes against Israeli interest. I think you defeat the enemy and then you let aid in if they are already defeated, if you are past that thing. But once the fact that we are starting to do this before the war is still over, sort of worries me that basically we are looking, even if occupation happens, we are looking at the same scenario that happened the last time Gaza was occupied and it was done improperly. I think it might still, we might still be able to turn it around, but yeah, it is definitely something to be wary of. Continuing with the article, the distribution will serve only the South, where a new Israeli military reoccupation strategy approved by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's security cabinet last weekend plans to relocate most of Gaza's more than 2 million people, while it escalates operations against what it says are Hamas militants still operating in the enclave. So, we can just quote whatever Hamas says in the south, but, yeah, they say Hamas is in the north. I mean, who knows? I think like that there is no Hamas anywhere in Gaza anymore, apparently. Um, I don't know if you guys have much to comment on this one. It's the same kind of
Yeah.
BS.
Who's keeping those hostages then if there's no Hamas left anywhere?
It's sort of like it's the same way when people talk about the war. It just is. It's not. Nobody made any choice. Nobody made any commitments. It just happened.
Yeah. The hostages are held. The
Yeah.
hostages were taken. Yeah.
Uh, Continuing, despite US diplomatic lobbying in support of the plan, the UN and virtually all other organizations have refused to participate. They have described it as against fundamental humanitarian principles and violating international law. I mean, yeah, us as humanitarians. Again, I just don't understand why we're listening to sort of anything, any sort of international body. Give me like one situation where the UN, maybe somewhere across the world, but one situation in the Middle East where UN intervention actually did anything. They still didn't do shit in Yemen. People are, talking about people who are actually starving. People are actually starving in Yemen. UN didn't do shit about it. When it comes to sort of even protecting Israel against aggression, either Egypt before I think the Suez Crisis even originally, or Lebanon, or in Lebanon where um, there was the UN sort of military support or the Security Council support in the south to dismantle Hezbollah. They didn't do shit for 20 years. There is not a single instance of UN actually doing anything, caring about the fundamental humanitarian principles. They didn't do anything a single time in Middle East. I have no idea why anybody should ever sort of care for anything they say. Not to mention all their comments about Israel that pretty much amounted to Israel Jews should probably just get out of the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, if they're really worried about famine, why don't they focus on the hostages? The hostages, we've seen how they come out from the hands of Hamas and the Palestinian and the Gazans. We see what state they were released, and we know that they're still there. They're still held by the civilians. They're held by Hamas. They're held by the Gazans. But nobody really cares about that. Nobody cares about a famine in Sudan. Nobody cares about the fact that Islamists all over Africa are causing all sorts of deaths and starvation situation. Islamists in Pakistan have been causing this ruckus with India, but we don't talk about that. It's just a humanitarian when it involves Israel defending itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I noticed that within this, they mention the fundamental humanitarian principles. But of course, they don't identify what those are because they daren't identify what those are. Because if they identify what those are, they expose them for being the evil that they are. Because essentially, at the bottom of it is that all humans are equal. All humans are equal, regardless of the evil actions some humans take. So if you imagine a scenario where you've got a hostage and a hostage taker, and the hostage is tied to a radiator, and the hostage taker is standing there over him, making sure he doesn't either escape or have a life in any way, and you say, look, here's a bread roll for you, poor hostage, and here's a bread roll for you, hostage taker. All humans are equal. All deserve to be given free bread rolls. And all of that is just, this is the principles that they want you to just accept based on the word humanitarian. Humanitarian being sold to you as a cuddly word which doesn't require analysis, which makes you think that all humans are equal, but doesn't let you consider for one moment how evil some of those humans are in terms of how they abducted people on October the 7th, or dragged them by the hair, or raped and murdered, or killed mothers and their children. None of that is in there. It's just but it still works. It still works because people don't choose to focus on what the word really means, and they're endlessly fed this line, and they have an emotive response to it rather than a thinking, rational response to it. And as soon as you start to unpick it and say, well, what are those fundamental humanitarian principles you mean? And what about in this case? And what would you do in that case? And how can you tell that one human, chooses this particular path in life, and this other human chooses this other path in life? One's a murderer, one's is trying to be a productive human. It's just, it would be exposed if you did that, and it needs to be exposed. And people need to do that more often, even in their own private conversations.
Yeah, I mean, the organizations like the UN, they keep talking about the human rights, but they never talk about the human wrongs. They never talk about, the fact of what I just wanted to do the joke. I don't need to finish my thought. Let's continue with the next paragraph. The re-escalation of its war and reoccupation of Gaza with massive force represents a dangerous sign that the Netanyahu government, held prisoner by its hard-right members, is implementing Trump's plan to transfer Palestinians out of Gaza. It is no less than ethnic cleansing. Quote, "We are finally going to occupy the Gaza Strip," end quote. Far-right Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich warned this week. The suggestion is forever. He added that while returning hostages to their families is important, it is, in quote, "not the most important goal," end quote, compared to crushing Hamas. Hostages' families are outraged at an operation that is likely to condemn the 29 hostages still held by Hamas. So I'm glad I said there are hostages being held by Hamas. First of all, again, sort of the lack of actual sort of thinking, the saying that Netanyahu government is held prisoner by its hard right members. This is not the case. If Netanyahu wanted to make peace, he has all the allies on the left he needs to make peace with Hamas. If he wants to surrender, he can simply surrender. The 7 or whatever seats that Bezalel Smotrich and Ben Gvir have will he can do without if he really wants to surrender. Talking about the ethnic cleansing. By the way, in international law, there is actually no definition of ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing is not an actual term in international law, but it's a catchy thing. You can say, if you don't want to say genocide, you can just say ethnic cleansing, and it's because it has no definition. You can just use it however you like. And
And not only that, but there is an ethnicity here. The Palestinians are not an ethnicity. So that's inappropriate use of the word in the first place.
yeah, and I mean, yeah, absolutely. They are Arabs, and they are the same kind of Arabs as within Israel itself, who do have a full citizenship. The only difference is, ones are citizens and ones are not. It's not about their skin color. It's not about whatever ethnicity means in this. And yeah, when it comes to Bezalel Smotrich talking about we will finally going to occupy Gaza Strip, and it's not the most important goal to bring the the hostages home. As unfortunate as it is, that is actually what needs to happen. You actually need to destroy the enemy, destroy the spirit of the enemy, if you wish to actually live in peace. This kind of focus on the hostages is the exact thing that makes sure more hostages will be taken in the future, because you're giving in, because you're giving up. And yeah, so it definitely plays into what we have been seeing since the start of the war.
Yeah, it is sad that people, I mean, it's understandable that the families of the hostages still alive would like their loved one to be returned. but this, in the first place, will require lots of IDF personnel to be put in danger. This would require some daring operations or a total capitulation of the Israeli government, which means that Hamas will be learning again that taking hostages is a worthwhile occupation. It's good for them to take hostages because they know at some point they will return them in exchange for something else. So in the end, Hamas always wins as long as they have hostages. And it sounds callous, but to invoke the Hannibal Directive, where once you're taken by Hamas, I'm sorry, you're a casualty of war. And I know it's very harsh and sounds really heartless and whatever, but in the end, if you don't go down this route, you will perpetrate the, as you mentioned, the taking of hostages in the future. It will never stop. They will never stop because they know that there's too much to gain. They had thousands for the few hostages that have been released. They had thousands and thousands of criminals returned to them, terrorists, people who actually went into various places and killed Jews. So to the Hamas and the Palestinians, these are heroes that have been returned to them. But these very heroes are the same people who, in the future, will cause more and more violence. You know, Sinwar was one of these people that was released in a similar event. So you cannot go down this route. It will never end.
And it's no coincidence, is it, that the phrases like held prisoner are the first time they occur in an article like this, it's related to Israel. It's related to Israel's government. It's related to the hard right. It's the hard right that hold prisoners. That's the first instance of it, according to this article, and you see that all the time. You see the number of references where a phrase like "held hostage" or "held prisoner" is used as an analogy or as an equivocation, as if, well, everyone's holding prisoners in some form or another. Look at those objectivists; they're held hostage by their reason. I mean, it's all the time you see this equivocation going on, and this is just a way of lessening the real holding of hostages by Hamas, to making sure you don't focus on that one, the actual genuine instance of it, and therefore that you're distracted constantly by it. So when it is mentioned, it's mentioned right at the end in terms of a secondary thing, which is always lessened by the fact that Israel has always been mentioned first as the prime evildoer in any situation. I don't understand why people fall for it as readily as they do, but I guess it's just because they don't have an active, focused mind, and that's what is required of all of us.
And the last paragraph, the only real hope for a long-term settlement remains peace talks and the ambition of ending the war with a comprehensive deal to recognize Palestinian autonomy, a two-state solution, and the mutual security of both Israel and Palestine. Israel's escalation of its military campaign threatens to move any such prospects of the agenda, which is a great way to finish the article, coming back to the idea of a two-state solution. An incredibly, I don't know what to even call it, not understanding of the situation itself, because nobody on the Palestinian side wants peace. Nobody on the, for that matter, very few, or at least definitely not enough on the Israeli side, want a two-state solution, which I think they have a much bigger reasons for that. They shouldn't want it. But yeah, Palestinians want more violence, and sort of giving it that it's Israel that is foiling those plans is simply, I mean, ahistoric. It's the Israeli actions in Gaza, didn't just happen despite what this article would want you to believe. It was Hamas who started this, not only on October 7th, long before them, but definitely most recently on October 7th. Marco, any last thoughts, and where can people find you?
Yeah, this last bit of the article effectively reiterates the old chestnuts. You know, diplomacy is a good thing. Whatever happens, you must have diplomacy. It's like Trump. Whatever happens, we must have a deal. I don't care if it's a deal between Xi Jinping and Putin or some murderer and the victims, as long as we have a deal. The deal is a good thing. It doesn't matter what the content is. We have a deal, we have diplomacy, so things will be sorted out. Ignoring the fact that for the last 80 years, diplomacy is revealed itself to be a total bogus concept. Because, as you mentioned, these people, the Palestinians, do not want peace. They want the Jews gone, and not gone only geographically, but physically. And certainly, they do not want a Jewish state near them. So this kind of racism makes any kind of agreement or deal impossible. But if you ignore the nature of the people involved, then you can push for diplomacy as much as you like. You can push for a deal as much as you like, but it will never be a solution.
This list at the end here, this paragraph at the end here, is a list of the sanitized terms that the Palestinians wanted from the outset, that Hamas wanted from the outset, minus the killing all the Jews part of it, which doesn't fly, doesn't make you look humanitarian if you mention that. So they're trying to focus on the rest of it, and of course they're trying to, as you said, peddle all these endless lines about a two-state solution, even though there was, in all essence, a two-state solution prior to October the 7th. And what happened? It was an absolute disaster. And you can argue that even the Palestinians were absolutely ruining their own lives in the way that they were leading them, by the ideology that they were following and how that was put into practice, and the fact that ended up with tunnels and the difference between the Gaza Strip and the rest of Israel. So yeah, it's all in there, isn't it? And it's all the summary at the end there that just makes you return to zero, return to the starting point, ignore any of the events that have occurred in between, and just state that the same solution that you've always pretended was a possibility will be a possibility once again, regardless of any evil human volition by those peddling an ideology which requires the murder of lots of people, which is exactly what Hamas have been doing.
And we also have a super chat from Roland. Thank you so much. He says, "Admit it, guys, you're being held hostage by my super chats." Absolutely, we will not leave until there's more super chats. Did you guys say where can people find you?
I'll mention it now. The Briefly Objective, sister channel to this, with short form material taken from the conversations, many of them on this channel, and you can find that in the details below where it says for short form material. Click here. So please like, subscribe, and watch as many as you can. Thank you.
And we'll continue covering all of this on tomorrow's episodes of the Daily Objective and the reality show. Thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and bye-bye.
Bye.